How you doing, everyone? Thanks for coming along. Today we have Ben Mounsey, who's joining us on via Zoom. And Ben is a GB fell runner. He's won absolutely tons of races. I've seen him rock up at different races, and he's just casual, as you like, turns up, chatting away, and then off he goes, wins the race. So Ben is an amazing runner. He's ran for, who have you ran for? England, GB.
Culture, England, yeah.
Yeah, Team GB. You've won it, ran at the World Champs, European Champs, British Champs. So really experienced, really good runner. And so Ben, so let's say hello to you. And how did you get into your running? Let's start off there.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on first of all, Matt, and it's good to see you. I think the last time I saw you in person was in Scotland, wasn't it? It was at the Salomon. Was it the Salomon Skyline a couple of years ago?
Salomon Skyline, about 18 months ago now, or thereabouts.
Yeah. Pre-COVID, when it all was well and all was normal, and
I know you were helping out on my stand as well. You're a cracking salesman, so.
Oh, try, mate. Yeah, it's jack of all trades, master of none. I think that's what it is.
Ben was just helping me sell stuff and sell the Skyline, and then he'd just nip off, run the race, win it, and come back and carry on.
It was good
to sell stuff.
It was good for sales, though. It was good for sales, wasn't it?
Good for sales. Yeah. Certainly was.
But yeah, I've been running a long time now, Martin. It's nearly 20 years, I think. So I feel like I've been on the scene for quite a while. My body certainly feels it anyway. I'm definitely feeling my age a little bit more now, and I'm a vet this year as well. So It's kind of a big year for me. But looking back, I probably started running seriously when I was in my early 20s, bit before perhaps. But I was a cyclist first of all at university.
Okay, didn't know that.
And then I kind of got into running more really out of convenience, if anything else. So I used to run to work because it was quicker than waiting for the bus. The bus always used to get stuck in traffic where I lived. And by the time I'd just run to work, I'd already beaten the bus. So that was the first kind of way in, really. I started off with my local running club at the time, Stainland Lions, doing a few cross-country races. And I think I realised that I enjoyed doing the off-road stuff more than kind of the road stuff. And that's kind of when I got into fell running. And living in Yorkshire, there's plenty of opportunity for fell running. And that was my way in, really, to the kind of off-road circuit. And that's since developed to kind of all disciplines of off-road running, which includes kind of trail and mountain running as well. And I think I'd probably say that in the last few years, I've done more trail and mountain running because I've been traveling through Europe, as you know, the last kind of decade, doing various different races. But I still like to come back and do fell running as well because it's a completely different and discipline to anything else. It's very unique and specific as well to the UK.
You're the home of fell running, being Yorkshire and near the Lake District, so no wonder you fell into that. Yeah,
and I started by doing the local fell races, but actually we've got the two kind of English championships. We've got the classic English championship with the short, the medium, and the long races that takes place all over the country. And then we've also got the Bofra Championship, which are the short races, a separate series completely, which are only really kind of like a mile or up to about, I'd say, 5 miles in length maximum, which are classic up and down races. And they do take place all around kind of England and Scotland and the likes, but more so I would say in Yorkshire. I think if I think about the location of most of those races in the Bofra series, they're within about 10 miles of my own front door.
Bofra series, you're saying?
Bofra series, yeah. So it's the British Open Fell Runners Association.
Okay.
So they do. I mean, it does extend to Scotland as well. So the one that I can think of off the top of my head that I've done a couple of times is the Alva Games. So we've travelled up. It's been quite a journey to get there, but it was part of the kind of festival and the fair that takes place, the games, the atmosphere of everything else that's going on. You've got the sort of attraction for the family and the kids. You've got the rides and you can buy candy floss and refreshments, and then you've got like hound racing and that kind of thing, and you've got people competing on bikes. You've got wrestling, that sort of thing. But then as part of that celebration and that day where people come together, you've got classic fell race, a classic mountain
Right,
race,
okay.
a bit like
So
the kind of Grasmere Guides race, that kind of thing.
okay.
And the race is part of the day, but for me, it's the main event. And I would say, arguably, I'm not saying that everything else isn't as important, but everybody kind of looks forward to that race because it's something you can see as a spectator from the main show field and watch most of the race take place because you're running on a hill that's kind of local to where that showground is. And it's usually straight up and straight down. So it's.
I was going to say, is it so like right off the bat, is it just straight uphill?
Oh, man, it's like you start with the gun and you just full sprint from the word go.
Right.
Usually flat out, running around like a track in front of all the crowds because there's thousands of people there. Yeah. And then you might cross a road and you're straight onto the open fell, and they're usually really steep, really dangerous in parts, but they're over pretty quickly. You know, you're sort of talking about 20 minutes, 5 minutes for a race. In which time you don't enjoy them really, other than when you finish. It's a real effort, as you can imagine. It's lung busting. I quite like that.
I wouldn't even be warmed up in 20 minutes.
No, that's the thing. I think you've got to kind of get your body to the optimum level where you are ready just to go, and you've got to do quite a lot of warming up, to be honest. And as I've got older, I have to warm up a lot more, as you can imagine, and I'm sure it's the same for everybody. It's like starting the car after it's been cold, overnight. You've got to defrost everything and get everything up and running first before you can go anywhere. And it certainly feels the same when I do a race like that because it's and
on fell running, can you pretty much do fell running anywhere in the world, or is it very specific to sort of like North England and Scotland?
No, do you know, that's a really good question, and I would say it's very specific to the UK. Or places where we've got similar terrain to the UK, which isn't very many places, to be honest. And it's because a lot of the time you're running over, rough and boggy ground. It's very heavy going. You need a lot of grip. That's the main thing you're looking for from a fell shoe. And quite often you're running on tracks or trails or trods, we call them, where the sheep have been and maybe forged a little route. And it's not always obvious where you're going to run. So if you compare that to something in Europe, for example, where you've got a nicely polished single track, or you sort of taking on a route that's been done before many times and it's very established, you might actually be navigating a section of a fell race where you're climbing over this steep and kind of rough ground, and navigation becomes part of the actual contest as well as the running. It's not just about the physical. It adds another element to the competition, as it were.
Yeah. So navigation to the point of where you actually get the map and compass out, because surely if it's only 20 minutes long, then you don't have time to do that.
Yeah, so for something like the Bofra series, it's usually flagged. It's quite a short race, but if it's a long race, a fell race, should I say, you might have a series of checkpoints, and the start and the finish might be flagged, but everything else in between, you're kind of left to your own devices. You've got to get to those checkpoints by whatever means possible, and usually you all follow a similar route because that's generally the quickest way to go, and as much as the direction you can go as straight as possible, really. But very often you've got to be able to read the ground because you might go a slightly longer way around to get somewhere, but it could be faster running. It's better running, and you might not necessarily be hacking over rough ground to shorten the path. You might take a longer route, but it could actually pay off and be quicker by doing that, rather than going more direct. It's a case of having a bit of knowledge about the terrain as well. And in most cases, if possible, I've always tried to recce fell races. So practice them before the race, so I get to know what the terrain is like, where to go, and how to approach it. So where to put efforts in. Although usually I just kind of go as fast as I can from the start. So
and your strength. Yeah, do you lead right from the off, or are you catching people up on the down?
Very much depends on the distance of the race. So if it's something like a Bofra race where it's short and sharp, I'll just go off from the gun and I'll just kind of go as fast as I can from the very, very start and hold on and hang on. Whereas if it's something that's a lot longer, anything over, say, 15 miles, I've got to be a lot more tactful and I've got to approach it differently. So I might think about who else I'm racing against and how to race those people not to the ground. Maybe who to follow, who not to follow, as the case would be. And also it depends on the weather as well, because there's that confidence in knowing where to go, and the weather can have a big impact on that and bearing on that, because it might be that if call it the clag is down and the visibility is poor, then you might have to do some navigating. And it becomes not just a race based on ability, it's also wit and a bit of intelligence in how to race it and approach it in that way as well.
Yeah.
All to consider, I think, as opposed to a trail race.
What sort of length, what you go up to? So you obviously do the super short stuff, so like 5 mile to 15 miles. Sounds as if it's your preferred distance.
Yeah, I would say probably if I had to pick a distance, it would probably be around between 5 and 10 miles, because I feel like I can probably approach something like that in terms of distance with a lot of speed, top speed, and I can lead from the front wherever possible. And I can, I'm not having to think about further on in the race where perhaps I might start to deteriorate in performance. I can kind of hold the top speed for that distance. So,
what sort of elevation gain are you getting with that?
I like the steep races. So anything, I mean, for me, anything up to about 1,000 meters, I'd say, in a race. After that, I'd probably start to deteriorate quite rapidly. But if I trained for it, I would probably have to train for it, particularly if I was taking it seriously. But I do like the technical races as well. So anything that's got really steep downs, particularly, or steep ups, because that's where I excel. Over the really tough terrain, where I think perhaps other people might find challenging and slow down to tackle the terrain because they might not have the confidence. I would kind of approach that differently. I would really, try and go as fast as I can and probably take a lot more risks than many people would. I think I tend to do when I'm in a race.
What's your mindset for that? To just kind of let loose and just go for it. Most people would be a bit scared, but
I think if it was in training and I was wrecking a route, for example, and practicing it, I would obviously approach it with more caution. But when I'm in a race environment, I just switch off, and all I can think about is getting to that finish line as possible and beating whoever's around me. So I've only got one mode, and that is just to go as fast as I can, wherever I can, and unless it's longer than 15 miles, I'll approach everything in the same way. I'll just go eyeballs out, and sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't, depending on who I'm racing against and what the conditions are like and how fit I am at the time as well.
Yeah. And do you prefer sort of like the really soft, muddy conditions, or is it more harder, rockier, kind of Glencoe skyline kind of terrain?
I like a bit of both. I like a real mixture, if I'm honest, because I feel like I'm quite confident over different types of terrain. So perhaps not the stuff that's really runnable. So if there's any kind of racing that's got sections where you may have like 2 miles on the road at the end to come back into. I'll give you a classic example. Ben Nevis is a race that I love and hate in equal measure. So I hate the run out because it's on the road. I love the climb. I love the descent, probably more than any other descent I've ever done. Because it's very rough, especially when you're coming down the Redburn and the really gnarly stuff at the top. That's where I can really make a mark on that race. But then when I come back out on the road and I've got 2 miles of flat tarmac after descending quite hard, my legs are tired. I really suffer, and that for me is kind of the worst kind of finish to any race. Wherever I've got a section where I have to run at quite a pace, because at that stage in the race I'm tired. Also, I don't consider myself fast. I'm just quite good over the kind of rough terrain.
It sounds like you're more fearless than just a speedy track athlete type of thing.
Exactly, and I think I use that to my advantage. So whenever there is rough ground, I'll always try and make the most of that environment and that terrain, because I know that I can gain ground on people and make time up. Not everybody, because there are a lot of talented defenders out there, like Ian Holmes, for example, and talented climbers like Finlay Wild, who are just really good on that kind of terrain as well. But generally speaking, that's where I would feel that I would have an advantage over most people coming down the really steep stuff. And in some ways going up as well. Certainly going down.
Right. Have you done anything like the Bob Graham before, or Charlie Ramsey?
So I've not actually done as a challenge, all in one, because of the distance, going back to what kind of suits me, really, it's a bit too far for me, I'd say. I'd have to specifically train for it. I mean, I've no doubt that I could get round the routes, but I don't think I'd get round very fast. And I don't think I'd enjoy getting around them either, if I'm honest. But I have done the Bob Graham in many sections, so I've helped out and supported like numerous rounds. I've helped friends do their own Bob Grahams.
Yeah.
Also,
Before you crack on there, do you fancy just explaining what Bob Graham is? Because a lot of people won't know what the Bob Graham is.
Yeah, sorry, no, that's a good point actually. So it's basically a really famous round in the Lake District that takes in most of the most famous peaks of the lakes, but you do it in one go over 5 different sections. Each section is different in terms of distance and also not so much terrain, but the amount of peaks that you have to go over. And it's 42 peaks in 24 hours. So generally speaking, you've got to try and get round in 24 hours to complete the challenge. And the record is held by Killian Jornet in, I think it's about 12 hours and 35 minutes or something ridiculously quick like that.
Super hot day when he did it.
Oh, yeah, it was fantastic conditions, to be honest. Like the best conditions you could ever wish for, because not only was it a good day, it'd been good weather in the build up to that. So the ground was hard as well. There were no navigation issues. He'd got a super team to support him. And also, he is Killian Jornet as well. So taking nothing away from Killian, you get the best in the world with the perfect conditions, and I think you're always going to set a good time. But testament to the effort he put in on the day as well. He came over, he went for it, and he ran an amazing time. So that is the challenge. You've got to try and get around the 42 peaks in 24 hours, but you've got to contend with the terrain, the weather. You've got to know the route, which is getting easier to navigate because more people do it. Odds and paths are starting to appear. But you have to familiarise yourself with the route. You have to practice it before you do it, ideally. Know how to fuel yourself. Also have the right support in place. And I suppose logistically plan everything. So when you're going to get to certain points, as much as you can plan, because these things always change, don't they, on the day. You're either going to be faster or slower. But try and stick with a schedule that's manageable for you, really. But going back to have I done it or not, yes, I've done it in sections, but I've never done it as a whole. But I have done the Billy Bland Challenge, which is the same route, but you do it in pairs. So each leg, each of the 5 legs is done as a pair. And I've enjoyed that. It's fun and it's good to do. And I think I might still have the record with Callum Tinian on leg 2, which I don't think it's going to last long because it's a highly competitive route, but it's nice to, be part of a little bit of Bob Graham history, despite not having done the full route and having the kudos of doing the full route myself as a 24-hour challenge.
What's the difference in distance between the Billy Bland one and the Bob Graham?
There's nothing really, other than you do it in pairs. So each leg is done as a pair, but as a team. So there's more of a team ethic on it, rather than being an individual challenge. Okay. You attack each leg as a team and obviously go over that section as fast as you can. So I quite enjoy the distance of that, to be honest. I think that leg 2 is about 12.5 miles off the top of my head. And it's a good distance for me. And, it's over technical ground. You're going over the likes of Helvellyn and Fairfield and Clough Head, and I really like the route. In fact, I like all of the Bob Graham route, to be honest. But that is one of my favourite legs, and it's quite runnable as well. So you can really attack that section as a pair if you're doing the Billy Bland Challenge, because the distance, I would say, quite manageable for somebody like me.
Okay, and do you think as time goes on and you do, I don't know, most people stop doing the super speedy short stuff, and as they get older they go for slightly longer stuff. Do you think you'd ever do the full?
Yeah, I think so. And again, that's a really good question, because I've always done the short stuff because it suited me and the type of training that I do and what I enjoy doing. But naturally, as I get older, which I am doing, I'm 40 this year, as I've already mentioned, I've already started to slow down. So I think naturally I will go into the longer distances, because I can probably be as competitive or more competitive than on the shorter stuff. But I think I've still got maybe, I'd say, roughly five years of kind of out the short stuff before I go into the long stuff. And I'll approach it differently as well, and I'll train differently. But I'm kind of looking forward to that as well. It's a different kind of training and a different kind of challenge. And I'll definitely at some point have a go at the Bob Graham. If my body allows me to do it, I'll definitely do it, because it's so historic and iconic. And I love fell running, and I think if you're going to class yourself as a real fell runner, I think at some point you have to tackle Bob Graham. Yeah. And anyway, the purists will tell you that anyway, and I agree. I think it's something that you probably have to tick off your bucket list, have on your bucket list, you know, if you're really into fell running, which I am. You know, I love it. It's a great sport.
And you've got a huge amount of knowledge on the course, so it makes perfect sense that you do at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, over the years, because I've helped so many people, I do know the route intimately in many parts as well.
Yeah.
But also with the challenge like that, if I'm going to then ask for people to support me, it's expected. It's not, you know, the actual rule, but I'd say it's an unwritten rule, is that you would support other people and build up that rapport with other people, and it's part of the community where you show willing to get, you know, the support back. So because I've for many years helped other people, when it comes down to having a go myself, I would hope that people would support me as well.
I'm sure
in my
there'll be
challenge.
loads of people. Yeah, loads.
I hope so. Yeah. Is that an offer, Martin? You're going to help me?
Yeah. I have to learn the course myself because I've never run anyway.
Well, just carry some sandwiches, mate. That's all I'm asking.
Right.
Yeah, whoever supports me is going to need to carry a lot of food, put it that way, because I eat a lot of food.
Oh, that's good. I'd have to join you on the slow leg, where you just go in.
Trust me, mate, I think they'll all be slow. Especially over that distance.
Well, that's mainly kind of like fell running, but you like to kind of travel as well, don't you? You've been going abroad a lot over the past few years. I know you love Italy and the Amalfi Coast, and before lockdown, you you quit your job as a teacher, and you went off traveling in your camper van around Spain and France and just southern Europe. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I'll take you back to before the kind of travelling section, but you know, I really kind of cut my teeth doing the local fell races, and then sort of like 15 years ago, I got into it more now. Actually, I got into the English Championships, the British Championships, which are fantastic. You know, really highly competitive events and series that run over the course of the season, and I love doing those, and I still do. But I kind of got a little bit bored with doing the same routes and similar kind of races year after year. And what really excites me is traveling and going to see new places. So as soon as I had the opportunity and I could afford to do that, you know, and go and do these races abroad, I jumped at the chance. And I just love going to new places and experiencing new cultures, new environments, obviously doing different kind of races and challenges. And it's something that kind of really gripped me, and I just couldn't get enough of it. It was like an addiction. So going back to you mentioning about me quitting teaching, I was a teacher for 16 years. And I used to, on a Friday, escape teaching. I'd kind of jump over the fence as quick as I could at work and jump on a plane. On Friday night, I'd go and rate in Italy on a Saturday, come back on a Sunday night. Sometimes I'd come back and not even sleep before going into work on a Monday morning. I'd literally go straight to work from the airport. And that's just the kind of life I was living, you know, for quite a number of years. And I decided to take the plunge. And actually, the moment I decided to quit my job, I was going out to the Gran Canaria for a similar kind of weekend. I got a flight out to Gran Canaria for £5. There was a group of us who went. So my girlfriend came with me. We both got a flight for £5. And I didn't realise how far away Gran Canaria was, actually. I thought it was like a 2-hour flight. So I got on this flight thinking I can just hours away by reading the menu and, you know, the in-flight magazine. I realised it was like 4 hours. And I just finished work and had a stressful week. So I had a few gin and tonics. I ended up spending, I think, between us about 65 quid on gin and tonic on the plane. And during that time, so the flight was £5, spent 65 quid on gin and tonic. And during that time, I'd already planned to quit my job. My girlfriend was going to like quit hers. We were going to go travelling. And that was the moment.
Gin and tonic that helped with that decision?
Definitely. It gave me the confidence to make that decision, and the feeling that I had thinking I'm going out to Gran Canaria. I've just finished a mental week at work and I'm going to go race this weekend. And that's kind of what I live for. And I thought, well, why am I just not doing it all the time? Because, you know, my philosophy on life is that we're only here once. You should make the most of every day and every opportunity. And that's how I approach everything in life, really. And I'd been teaching a long time. I'd got what I wanted out of teaching. You know, I'd enjoyed the career for the time it lasted, but I felt like I was ready for a new challenge. And I felt like I was running out of time also with my running career. You know, I'm getting older and I wanted to have more time and devote more time to training and running. And I thought, do you know what? Just don't do it. And I'll find I had enough things in place to pay the bills just. And for me, I'm not driven by money. As long as I've got enough money to kind of live and survive. And I had the fantastic support of sponsors at the time, Innovate and now Sport Shoes, and a few other brands. who have been fantastic, during my career in terms of helping me, become I would say, for me, a successful athlete and support my journey. And I felt like it was the right time to go and just have a new chapter in my life where I race and train as much as possible and travel and explore as many places as I can before I get the world to do it.
I have heard other people, when they kind of quit their job and just become a full-time runner, they kind of burn out. Did that start to happen to you, or?
Yeah, it's weird, because it's something I've always longed for and lived for, and wanted to do. It's been like a dream for me, kind of going off in the camper van and living this life. And it's brilliant. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love it. And I think when I look back to how happy I was when we were in the camper van for like 6 months, traveling around Italy and France and Spain, it was just the best time. And I could do that like all my life. But it is different to how you imagine it's going to be. Also, I was like apart from my girlfriend, I was the only person that I knew that was doing that. So it's not, I won't say it's lonely, but your days are spent differently. Once you've done your run, you have to think about how you're going to, break up that day then, and what else you're going to do. And you can't afford to just go out, and it's not a holiday, it's a lifestyle, if that makes sense. So I had to change my mindset quite a lot, because when I've been out on these weekends and I had a full-time job and I could afford to kind of do the race, go training, go out for some drinks, and maybe have a nice meal. And you just can't afford to do that, especially when you've not got the money coming in. So I had to adapt, and that took a bit of practice, thinking about what I was going to cook, what we were going to cook, and what you do to fill your day. Even though I was working kind of part-time and in the van remotely, I was doing some design work, and I was doing a lot of writing for magazines, but also for the Sports Youth side. So I was doing a lot of research, thinking about when I'm going to get internet signal and when I'm going to do it. And it's not always the best environment to work in either, because you're kind of living on top of each other in this van. So it's getting used to that different way of life. So it's not all it's cracked up to be, but at the same time, it is amazing. And it does make you appreciate what you don't need as well. I just had a bag of kit and 2 pairs of trainers and some food in the fridge, and that is literally all I needed. And then I was thinking, I've got out at home full of just like stuff that perhaps don't necessarily need. I've got wardrobes full of like going out clothes, I haven't worn them over the last 12 months anyway. I've just been living in sports shoes and pajamas, but yeah, I've got a load of stuff that I perhaps didn't need, and it just makes you appreciate the kind of finer things in life, going for a walk and cooking a meal outside. In fact, I used to cook in like bus stops and things, like bus shelters. Like I once fried a steak in this bus shelter when the weather was really bad. It was raining in France once, so we pulled over the side of the road, and I set up my stove in this bush shelter and cooked a steak.
Why are you not cooking in the camper van?
Because it smells, the camper van, because you've got to like live in there, haven't you? So I've got this rule that if I'm going to fry anything, I don't ever fry in the camper van, because it'll like the smell just sticks to all your clothes. I'm just weird like that, really. So I just cook the steak outside. But that's another thing, you've got to kind of get used to the space that you've got as well, because the camper van is fairly spacious to a certain extent, but then when you're out for 6 months, you've got quite a lot of gear, and when there's 2 of you and you've got a dog and you've got all the things with you that you need to kind of live with and buy, you've got to think how you use that space, and sometimes you just get a little cramped in there. So I had to think about where I was going to cook and how I was going to cook and that kind of thing. But that kind of lifestyle, best. It wasn't everything I thought it was going to be. It was better in many ways, but also different and quite challenging. But I would go back in a heartbeat and do it.
How did you find races and stuff? Did you pre-plan things, or did you just come across things?
Yeah, well, that's another good question. So when we first went out, we went out with the intention of driving to Italy, first of all, to do Trofeo Venone, which is a really famous relay in the north of Italy, really prestigious. It's one I've done before, so I kind of knew that was the first part of the plan. And then after that, we purposely not planned anything other than the fact we were going to chase the weather. It was like October at this time, so we were going to travel south and just keep going south and kind of follow the sun, really, and what was left of it. And we drove down through Italy, down into France, and then Spain. And as we approached places, if we were training, we'd just get the phone up and go on the internet and have a look at routes that people had perhaps done on, say, Komoot, for example. Komoot is an app where you can kind of plan routes and look at what other people have done. sometimes I would put a message out on my Facebook and say like, oh, I'm going to stay here tonight. Does anybody like live near here or like recommend any routes? And they'd send me a route and I'll look on, you know, the computer before I did it. Or it might be a race route that I've done in the past where I could just go and run it at leisure. And then in terms of races, we were constantly looking for like races en route as well. So we did quite a bit of racing, but just really random stuff. So we did this one in the French Pyrenees, and it was in this tiny little village. I can't remember the name of this little village, but it was so low key, it was unbelievable. And I was thinking, oh, I'm just going to turn up here, like, I'm going to race this and I should win it pretty comfortably. You know, I didn't approach it with arrogance. It was just the fact that it was like so low key and so random. I thought there's going to be about 10 people in this race, so as long as I have a decent run, I should be well up there. And it turns out it was like part of the French VK series, the national series. So I got absolutely schooled by these like really fast French lads. I think I was 6th overall, which I was really pleased about, and I was like 2nd old person, which was really good. But it was a wake-up call, and it made me appreciate and realise that there is strength and depth and quality everywhere you go. You know, no matter where you travel, there's always a bigger fish in that pond, and it's not often go somewhere and confidently or say that I'm going to win a race, even though I've won many races during my career. It's just not the case. You always approach each one now, especially after
you don't know who's going to turn up, do you?
Yeah, exactly. So I always approach it with a bit of anticipation and kind of not dread, but just respect, you know, because there is always a good run in every corner of kind of society, in every pocket. And if there's a race on somewhere, you've got to appreciate there's probably the demand for a race to be on. So there's going to be a kind of trail running scene or a mountain running scene in that area, especially if it's kind of big mountainous terrain and a landscape. So the Pyrenees, for example, I mean, it's one of the most famous places, mountainous places on the earth. So you're going to have people that naturally run on that kind of terrain and in those environments. So I was a little bit foolish to think I was ever going to win that race, but it was fun. It was good, you know, and because I didn't know what to expect, that kind of adds to the excitement for me. And you approach everything with a blank canvas, and most of the time, if you do that, there's no expectation, and anything then becomes a bonus. You get to forge some new relationships, and I'm very wary of sticking to a very rigid plan and schedule, because for me sometimes it ruins it. You know, if we're kind of rushing to get somewhere for a certain time, it takes away the enjoyment and the spontaneity of rocking up somewhere just off the cuff. And if you like somewhere, you can spend a few more nights there than perhaps you originally had planned. And that was very much the kind of tone that we set for the whole trip. And when we eventually did get into Spain, we didn't plan on staying anywhere longer than a few days, roughly speaking, but we found an area that we really loved, and that was the Costa Blanca.